Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive, literally world-changing geopolitical shift that's happening all around us right now. We're looking at modern empire building in the age of globalization. But, here's the crazy catch. This is an empire being built entirely without the use of military force. By methodically moving from domestic growth to international ports to vast infrastructure networks and ultimately dominating global trade routes, China is completely redefining what global influence looks like today. So let's dive into exactly how they're doing it.
Right off the bat, this brings us to a massive overarching question. How do you actually build a global empire without firing a single shot? I mean, for centuries, empires were forged through conquest, right? Military might. But in our highly connected, modern world, that old model just doesn't work the same way. It has severe limitations. Instead, China is systematically replacing traditional economic rivals by laying down physical infrastructure and basically rewriting the rules of global trade. They aren't conquering developing nations. They're making themselves an absolutely indispensable partner to them.
To really grasp the sheer, unprecedented scale of this initiative, just consider this number, 150. That is the number of countries currently participating in China's grand strategy. We're talking about nations across Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, and even Latin America. To put that into perspective, this is a single initiative that touches the majority of the nations on Earth. The scope of this is simply staggering.
To make sense of all this, we'll break it down into 6 parts today. 1. The new Silk Road. 2. The physical empire. 3. Fueling the machine. 4. Financing a multipolar world. 5. Cultural soft power. And finally, 6. Global reactions.
Okay, starting with Section 1. The new Silk Road, rebirth of an ancient route.
We probably all remember learning about Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, or the great Ming Dynasty admiral Zheng He navigating ancient trade routes. Well, what China is doing today is essentially resurrecting those historic overland and maritime routes, but seriously upgrading them for the 21st century. This is the Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI. Launched by President Xi Jinping back in 2013, it's a massive global infrastructure and economic development strategy. The goal? To enhance global trade and connectivity by stepping in and addressing a huge infrastructure gap in developing nations.
Watch how rapidly this whole thing escalates. In 2013, it was just an announcement made in Kazakhstan. By 2015, the official vision was fully outlined. By 2017, the BRI was considered so absolutely crucial to China's foreign policy that it was written directly into the Chinese Communist Party's constitution. And looking ahead to 2025, the participating countries account for nearly 75% of the world's population. It pivoted from a regional pitch aimed at developing countries into a cornerstone of global influence representing over half the global GDP, all in just a few short years. It's wild.
Moving on to Section 2. The physical empire. Ports, rails, and roads.
So, we've talked about the concept, but now let's look at the actual concrete and steel being laid down. The crown jewels of the BRI are physical monuments to trade. We're looking at critical maritime ports like Gwadar in Pakistan, Hambantota in Sri Lanka, and Piraeus in Greece. You have cutting-edge, high-speed rail lines slicing right through Indonesia and Laos. And recently, the Chancay port in Peru, which literally creates a brand-new maritime land corridor stretching all the way from Asia to Latin America. This pipeline of ports and infrastructure is fundamentally rewiring global trade to flow straight toward Beijing.
But you might be wondering, why build outside its borders? Well, there's a very strict 3-step domestic logic driving the strategy. Step 1, China has a massive excess in industrial capacity. Think steel, cement, construction crews, and they desperately need somewhere to channel it. Step 2, by building trade routes westward, they actually develop their own historically poorer western regions. And Step 3, by funding infrastructure in developing countries, they create entirely new, wealthy export markets for Chinese goods. It's a highly calculated domestic economic solution, but executed on a global stage.
Let's look at Section 3. Fueling the machine, energy and security.
Now, you cannot build or maintain an economic engine of this magnitude without enormous power, and that exposes a massive vulnerability. 70%. That's how much of China's total oil imports come from the Gulf states and Africa. China is the world's largest consumer and importer of oil, meaning the absolute lifeblood of their economy is heavily reliant on foreign resources. And more importantly, those resources have to be shipped across vast sea lines of communication. If those shipping lanes are threatened, the Chinese economy essentially grinds to a halt.
Which brings us to a fascinating geopolitical concept called the string of pearls. It's a brilliant metaphor used to describe China's strategy for securing these vital sea lines. by building, funding, and operating commercial deep-water ports all along the Indian Ocean coast. From Africa to the Middle East, over to Sri Lanka and Pakistan, China ensures that its energy supply chain remains totally secure. Those commercial ports we discussed earlier, they are the physical pearls, directly protecting the continuous flow of energy resources into the country. It's a giant strategic puzzle coming together.
Next up, Section 4, Financing a Multipolar World, the New Banks.
To build all this infrastructure and consolidate this influence, you need money. A lot of it. But China isn't just using traditional Western financial institutions, they're actually building their own. See, since World War II, global economic governance has been dominated by the US-led Bretton Woods system, primarily the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. But China felt this system just didn't recognize their true economic weight anymore. So they initiated their own alternative, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or the AIIB. This is a deliberate structural shift intended to transform the global economy from a unipolar US-led system into a multipolar one.
Now, what's really fascinating here is a phenomenon researchers call the catfish effect. It's exactly what it sounds like. By dropping the AIB into the global pond, like a highly active catfish among smaller fish, it actually sparked an intense competitive reaction. Legacy institutions like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank suddenly pledged to increase their own infrastructure investments in Asia just to keep up. So regardless of the geopolitical motivations behind it, this competition has triggered a massive, much-needed investment boom for regional development.
Beyond just physical infrastructure, there are some really broad macroeconomic strategies at play here. China is actively working to elevate the global standing of its currency, the yuan, and trying to break the monopoly of the US dollar in international trade. They're utilizing regional alliances like BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to increase their influence. Ultimately, they want to ensure that multilateral aid serves their national interests, seamlessly bypassing traditional Western free market limits.
Let's dive into Section 5, Cultural Soft Power, Winning Hearts and Minds.
So far, we've mapped out the physical ports, the infrastructure, and the banks. But to secure lasting global influence, a superpower needs an invisible layer of cultural appeal. This is the concept of soft power. As defined by political scientist Joseph Nye, soft power is the ability to co-opt people rather than coercing them. It's about making your culture, your political values, and your foreign policies genuinely attractive to the rest of the world. China recognized that to be a true global leader, they couldn't just write checks. They needed to project a benign, attractive image globally.
The front line of this soft power strategy is the Confucius Institute program. These are government-funded organizations embedded in universities and schools globally to teach Chinese language and culture. For China, it represents an amazing opportunity to foster positive interaction and deep cultural understanding. However, as our sources point out, the reception has been highly mixed. While they undoubtedly provide great educational opportunities, they've also met significant skepticism in regions like the US and the EU over concerns regarding academic freedom and direct government influence.
And that leads us to our final section. 6. Global Reactions, the Pushback.
A global strategy of this massive magnitude naturally sparks a highly polarized spectrum of reactions. From the developing nation's perspective, the Belt and Road is highly appealing. It brings desperately needed infrastructure, creates jobs, and offers a robust alternative to Western financial institutions that often come with incredibly strict conditions. But from the Western perspective, there are deep fears. Critics accuse China of debt-trap diplomacy, essentially burdening poorer nations with unsustainable loans, and worry that these commercial deep-water ports have dual-use potential for the Chinese military down the line. We're seeing two very different views of the exact same projects.
But, the pushback isn't solely a Western phenomenon either. Consider the words of the late John Magufuli, the former president of Tanzania. Speaking about a Chinese